My name is Dr. John Robert Alley, Rob Alley to friends. I'm a retired physical therapist and anatomy professor from Alaska. Lived in Alaska for 30 years, originally from Canada, studied anthropology, physical therapy, and I was a drugless practitioner in Ontario, Canada. I had the pleasure of working with Haidas, Tlinkits, and Tsimshians in Alaska, as well as other native groups across Canada. And I've probably heard more different Sasquatch and Bigfoot stories from natives than anybody except Dave Paulides working with the Hoover Project in California. So I'm lucky that way. My perspectives and what I've seen match what my natives have told me about. So what I've seen with my two eyes in British Columbia and Alaska doesn't fall outside of any description of Sasquatches that you might hear anywhere. So I've had eyes, I've had my feet on the ground, I've been there, I've seen what people are talking about. But there's a lot of information that doesn't get talked about. What is out there in the night, what attributes Sasquatches have? Obviously not an ape. You can't have swimming, you can't have speech and various kinds of sophisticated communication. Never mind the paranormal things that no ape could certainly do. Just looking at the basic flesh and blood things, that's not a pongid or an ape-like evolutionary thing. And upright walking, that takes forever. That takes forever, and hominids are the upright walkers. We've been walking since Laetoli tracks found in the Rift Valley, over 1 million years ago.
So the Tlingit Haida
Yes.
people, what type of paranormal things do they talk about?
Well, they talk about different kinds. The Tlingit talk about different kinds of beings. You've got your regular Sasquatch, that could be a Sasquatch. Huichlan was an old Tlingit word that the southern Tlingits used. It was known to members of the Denny family. Huch meaning ankle or foot, Hlan meaning big. Huichlan, it would mean Bigfoot. That would be your regular Sasquatch. Also, Kushtaka. The language of the Tlinkits suffered immensely during the 20th century, the mid-1900s, 1800s, early 1900s, in places like residential schools. I won't name the schools, but the language lost lexicon. And so I think you ended up, and many agree with me, the word Kushtaka is a shape-shifting creature, and it can take the shape of a human or a Sasquatch or an otter or a raven, any number of other things. And an elder that I was familiar with in Prince of Wales, on Prince of Wales Island, answered the question all her grandchildren had for her grandmother, auntie, is a Sasquatch and a Kushtaka the same thing? Her reply was yes and no. And the granddaughters all asked, well, how can that be? Her reply was, well, a Sasquatch is a Sasquatch, but a Kushtaka can be anything it wants. So it's important to distinguish. In certain parts of British Columbia, for example, you'll have Sleitlolol, which is just a regular Sasquatch that the carriers talk about. The Dalkeh people talk about this. There's also a cannibalistic type that fights, the Nain, and they fight with the Sleitlolol. The Sleitlolol used to trade blankets, maybe fish, maybe meat, what have you, with the Dalkeh, the carrier people in that Prince George, Chilcotin region until the arrival of the Hudson Bay Company muskets, and then everything changed. So
you're saying that the Bigfoot traded with the natives?
Some kinds of Bigfoot traded with the natives. Some kinds of Sasquatches traded with those. At least the oral traditions state that very clearly for these people.
Okay, so is there any relationship between Kushtaka, Sasquatch, orbs, and UFOs in the traditions of the natives here?
Traditions of orbs and energy is something that we have no real terms for. It's spirit energy. So in different tribal groups, you'll hear the terms light or spirit. It's difficult to tie that energy, a Sasquatch, with things like UFOs, but it's possible. There's certainly, in modern times, there's a movement. There's a question that's posed by women, Native women in Canada, Western Canada, where people have gone missing. Very simply, a folk belief, a popular common cultural perception that UAPs are in some way involved with the abduction of Native women, girls in Western BC. That's one approach.
Have you ever heard of a native group in Alaska thinking that Kushtaka or Sasquatch is an ape or gorilla?
I've never heard any Simshan. I've never heard any Tlinkits or Haidas discussing Gagits, wild people, or Kushtakas or Hutzlan, anything like a Sasquatch as anything other than a wild person. The connection with people, whether whether their origin may have been a lost human or something like that. In Athabascan areas, it's also very human. Most of Alaska, it's all human. Very few areas, only the Atna have some reference to something like a monkey. Now, at the same time, they recognize a human kind of wild hominid as well as another kind that's quite separate. So occasionally you'll get these two different kinds. The Tsimshian, although they have that famous monkey mask that was gathered up the Nass River in the early 1900s, that mask could be called, the Tsimshian and the Nass would have a name for it, Nach perhaps, or Bausch, like Bookwuss, like similar to the Quaquaquawak Bookwuss that Tom Seawood would talk about. At the same time, there were many different names for wild hair-covered people living in the mountains. Kedem Reality, Kedem Narhaks, Kedem Gethuli, people of the jack pine, people of the mountains. So different kinds of Sasquatches. I don't want to toot the horn of anybody like, well, Lauren Coleman, for example, has discussed how many different kinds there might be. Ivan Sanderson, the famous zoologist who pioneered work in Sasquatch, ABSM, Bigfoot, and around the world, crypto hominids, he suggested there could be a great number.
How many years did you live in Alaska, Rob?
27 years in Alaska.
27 years. Of those 27 years, how many years did you focus on researching Sasquatch?
Well, all the while I was a physical therapist, I'd hear the stories from my patients, and there are hundreds of them, and they're in my books. I continue to write them. I'll probably be recording them, writing them down for another 10 years.
Now, of those stories, I read some of the stories in your books about Sasquatch being seen swimming between islands.
Very common in British Columbia and here in Alaska, in Southeast Alaska. So in my new book, I've got native documentation and illustration done under the supervision of the witness, matching almost identically the illustration that a non-native fisherman had me draw from something he had seen 10 years apart from the native woman's sighting, and about just a few miles away. Both sightings within a couple hundred yards of shore on the, I think, east coast of Gravina Island. So
now, how does that fit into the apers belief, gorilla belief?
Well, the problem with that is that just because we have a lot of hair, it doesn't make us an ape. There is alpha-17 ketosteronism, which is a genetic condition that will allow for hair all over the body. There are Mexican families that have hypertrichosis. Sometimes this is genetic, sometimes this is endocrine. So different causes, but it doesn't make us an ape because we have this hairy covering, nor either does a great big physique. That doesn't make us an ape. When we have a hominid ancestry, we're bipedal, we have, communication, we have social behaviors and restraints, customs in place that allow us to help each other and live in larger groups.
Did the natives that you spoke with say that they had a language?
I have not only heard that from different natives and non-natives matching that, but also that you might even mind speak is a possibility, telepathy is a possibility. You might hear a voice. So hearing that, this is being noted as often from non-natives as it has from natives. So there's a tradition of that. Absolutely.
And in your mind, how does that fall into the ape gorilla side of things?
Well, I can't really plug it into anything that's definitely primate or great apes, but it's possible that all mammals have a certain ability to communicate using our electromagnetic field. I think everyone has had some deja vu. Practically everyone has experienced serendipity. We all have a pineal gland. I don't know whether we could migrate. I don't know if I could find my way back to Olympia, Washington, navigating with my pineal gland. But seriously, it's something that we still look at. I had a Boy Scout, a Scoutmaster who is an American chap, been to Duke University. He was up in Winnipeg in the 60s and 62. And he said that at Duke University, he was one of the original men who were doing research that was involving psychic or psi abilities. Professor Cadaret had a a Cocker Spaniel that they were working with at Duke University that could calculate 4 digits faster than a computer. The other thing that you know, if you have a dog, is that even when you're changing your shift and you're coming home at a different time, that dog will know when you're coming home. And your spouse will know this, and you'll be able to confirm that with your spouse and vice versa. People could well be the same way, and Sasquatches could too, for all we know.
Okay, give me your best bullet points that Sasquatch is human-based.
Sasquatches, they're human-based. Well, if you got into genetics, it's pretty obvious. If you're doing the genome, it's very, very obvious indeed. There's human mitochondrial DNA. Looking at a Sasquatch, the fact that they're bipedal, I mean, how the chances of an ape developing a bipedal pattern.
Well, the other argument is Gigantopithecus.
Right. Of course, we all looked at it because of its size. We all consider Gigantopithecus as something, and there may well be giant hominid, giant pungids like the zooth that Sanderson talked about in Nepal, along with the mete, the yeti, and the smaller thelmas that are in Bhutan and Nepal. So we have all these.
So give me. We only have a minute left,
Yeah.
Rob. Give me your best bullet points.
Swimming, the actual ability of a Sasquatch to swim. The vocalizations that I have heard Sasquatches making, or what had to be a Sasquatch in the night, 1 a.m., in a rapid staccato Asian-sounding language that was
Similar to Sierra sounds?
yes, very similar. Very, very rapid and put together like that, followed by a series of rising whistles going off into the forest. And this was in Ketchikan in the 2000s.
Do they have the ability to imitate things?
Absolutely. In my book, Brushes with Bigfoot, you'll read some interesting documentation by 2 men who were up on Dry Island out of the Stikine estuary, hearing their names being repeated and even phrases that they'd used. So whether it's mimicry or whether it's certainly not an animal thing.
The Bigfoot DNA study valid?
Valid, absolutely valid.
Thank you.
Okay.